I was surprised, honest, when I first volunteered, obviously, and let me backtrack a little bit first, though. Like, I will say, like, obviously, people don't really understand certain circumstances when they're not directly affected by it. But when it was brought forward, a lot of people were so excited to get on board and support those things, because obviously it's important that we have a healthy, sustainable league. So that was the coolest part about all of it, is seeing everybody really work. Like, you could tell there's like a share it. I've never felt so, how do I say this, united, I guess you could say, with so many different groups. Like, I could say I'm probably good pals in terms of, because you get on the little text threads with a lot of girls in the league, which normally I would never have interacted with ever on the soccer pitch, probably, and would probably be enemies on the field. But, it was cool. It was an awesome experience. But obviously, like, moving forward, I'm just like hoping that it just builds towards like a sustainable future.
We have Bri Visalli on the pod today, a Houston Dasher, Californian Pepperdine waiver.
Yeah, waves, baby.
But are you considered a waiver?
Well, when you're a freshman, you're just a ripple, and then you become a wave later on.
Legitly? Are you serious? That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. We actually, we played you guys when, and like, I don't know how you get any work done.
Also, like,
when Virginia went out there, I was like, is anyone else not paying attention? I feel like I'm looking at like the nicest scenery I've ever seen in my life. It's like a beach from the field.
Wasn't the Jamie Lynn Spears, wasn't that filmed there?
Yeah, the Pacific Coast Academy, PCA or something.
Yes.
Like that. And I was like, as a kid, always watching that, being like, that's so cool, Mom, can I go? And they're like, it's fictional. And I was like, oh, really? And then later on went. So that was fun.
And then we're like, oh, really? It is fictional.
How about that, Mom?
You take that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, seriously, dude, thank you so much for jumping on with us. Your
Thanks for having me.
Is truly, truly incredible. And I was happy to be part of it for maybe 2 months. But we definitely
wildest 2 months.
Oh, dude, it was insane. And we will definitely get to that, because it's a very insane story that I think needs to be shared. So
but before we, get into all the NWSL drama, because there always is some, let's dive a little bit into your, college career. So I think people don't realize this, but, when they think about powerhouses, I feel like a lot of times you get the UNC, Florida State, but Pepperdine in the last 10 years has really like made a presence, I'd say, in the women's soccer space. And you've had many players be drafted in the league. So talk a little bit about your decision to go to Pepperdine and why you feel like, as a program, despite not being in, call it a Power 5 conference, you've been able to kind of get players to develop and then play professionally.
Yeah, I think part of the decision obviously had to do with the scenery, as we already talked about, because I actually, in Northern California, was close to the beach a lot, and that was something that was special for me growing up. But that being said, I never really dreamed of playing pro, which sounds kind of insane, because like that's every little girl's dream. But at the time, you guys know what it was like. I mean, only a few people would go pro, and then if that was the case, like the league would potentially fold occasionally here and there, and like I don't know, it just wasn't like a viable thing. So at the time, I mean, I just made it based off of something that would be competitive, and then also because I also wanted to get a good degree. So that's ultimately why I chose it. And then obviously I think, talking about players developing through Pepperdine, the main player that comes to mind that put Pepperdine on the map is Lynn Williams, who I got to play 1 year with my freshman year. And then, like you said, just kind of this trickle down effect for her to break that barrier. Like you guys had said, usually it's the bigger schools that are getting those players drafted. And trust me, I have a locker room full of UNC and Virginia chicks. So I know you guys are there a little too much. Oh. Joe knows this.
Yes.
So like that it's kind of cool in that essence, I guess. And just competing and I guess continuing that. But I mean, we played for instance, Puerta at Santa Clara, and Julia Ertz obviously went there, but yeah, Pepperdine really wasn't like a huge contender, so to speak, or a brand name for soccer.
Yeah,
So.
Brandon. Yeah. What
so
do you
fun,
think
though.
then? I know. What do you think though creates? Is it the culture? Is it the coaching? What do you think kind of sends you guys to that next kind of echelon level of soccer?
Yeah, I mean, typically it's hard to recruit because athletics has like a set amount of scholarships and everything, and Pepperdine
Yep.
itself is very expensive. So we have to make do with a
Yeah.
hard budget. So I will say the coaching staff, like I have to give credit to them in terms of what they do. And Joe, you're like absolutely correct in assuming it's the culture and the character. And like we would joking, like in spring, we'd have evolutions where basically it was like boot camp and they tried to like replicate Navy SEAL training. And I was like, what are we doing? Like we literally locked arms and walked into the ocean. He's like, don't break. And I was like, we're drowning. So, I mean, it was kind of silly, but at the same time, they would joke like, we're building women of character. And like, honestly, I can say I've become a better person because of my college experience. And I feel like you can all agree with that. Like you just become such a different
100%.
human being and you grow. And so honestly, looking back on it, those memories are probably my favorite, more so than what happened on the field.
Yeah.
And I get to laugh now about it. At the time, obviously I was like, frick you, coach. Cause like
Yeah.
it sucked, but like, I just definitely think it like pushed us to new limits, and our coaching staff just did a really excellent job. So yeah, I can't speak highly enough about Tim and Max and Ari. They've just continued it too. And you can see now that presence. I guess they're getting ranked, but yeah. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
It
I like
matters so much, I feel like. And, you know, I think when you think about the big programs that have been successful, it's like, you know, Anson or Steve or whoever, it's like these coaches have been in place for 10 plus years. That's the only way you really start building a culture, is having someone with that experience who, you know what you're getting years into it, where I feel like hopefully this will happen in a better way in the NWSL, but you've seen so much movement. It's kind of hard to establish a true culture when there's unfortunate things happening for different reasons why coaches are leaving, but also just like a lot of movement, right? And you know better than anyone, every team's talented in the NWSL. Like it's not always the best talented team that wins. Sometimes it's the team with the best culture.
yeah, I agree with that like 100%. And you could even, I know the Challenge Cup back in the day, well, it counted for something then. Now everyone's like, whatever, Challenge Cup.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like we didn't have any U.S. women's national team players on our team. And I think
Love that run.
yeah, I mean, it was kind of cool to be a part of it, but also like you're alluding to, it's a bit of culture of, player ran and everything else as well as coach. So yeah.
So you are having an incredible senior year at Pepperdine.
Oh boy.
You then enter the 2018 draft, where you're drafted by the Chicago Red Stars with I have it with the 19th pick. Okay, sister girl. So we are both then, I was drafted by Boston folded, Chicago drafted me. We are drafted to Chicago together. That experience was definitely a whirlwind. I will definitely
describing it.
I mean, being stuck in the showers, there's a lot to that. So I just want you to kind of chat about one, you made the decision when we found out that we pretty much weren't going to be signed and that wasn't going to happen, and our rights would still be held in Chicago even if we didn't sign. They still held our rights.
We were dead, essentially.
Yes, we were yes, exactly.
So you're saying that they were going to give you no money to live, but then not let you go anywhere and not let you play anywhere else. So okay,
Yes.
Got it. Just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
I'm just going to hand the mic over to you and just kind of talk about your experience, because you, with a blink of an eye, had an aha moment of I can get an English passport. I'm getting an English passport. Golly, passport, and I'm piecing. So talk a little bit how, what happened, how you got your passport, then you went overseas. Let's hear it.
Yeah. Well, at first so obviously coming into Chicago was an experience, very unique experience. But like you said, the cards started to fall where they were going to be for the rest of the season. And like, I jokingly would tell my parents, and hopefully this isn't taken wrong by the listeners. I'm like, but I won't be signed unless someone drops dead. Like, that's just the reality of it. They have a set roster limit. I am fresh meat. Like, it does not matter. I mean, you knew what it was like, unless it was like a national team replacement situation, but then that was a temporary contract. So it like kind of counts. I don't know. But I don't know if you remember this memory, and hopefully this isn't weird sharing it, but when we were asked to step aside post training and sit down on the bench.
Yep. I do remember that.
Yeah, that for me was like,
that was your turning point.
That was it. And then we had that moment in the parking lot together when you and I both kind of broke down, and I hope I'm not sharing too much.
Oh no, share it all.
We're open here, girl. We're open here.
And when you called your mom, I'm like sitting there like trying to console you, and I'm like, why am I trying to console when this is our situation? Like, we need to fix it. Like, like something has to change. And so like it weirdly enough, like it hit me through us being together at times, like where we're just like, what are we doing? Yeah. And so that kind of, those were like the two defining moments for me. And then obviously, like you said, my mom's passport situation. I actually sent the wrong documents over because I sent over her naturalization paperwork, not her birth certificate. So I got her birth certificate in this process as well. But it happened so quickly. I mean, I applied and I thought, you know how it is with any government agency, it usually takes like a month to do something or anything. I got it like within 2 weeks. And then I kind of was like, I guess I'm going. And, you know, looking back on it, Joe, I bet you probably felt the same way, but it felt like a failure when I was in Chicago, like and you know, that's deeply personal because it just felt that way.
We were drafted and then we were, it felt, I completely.
Dispensable. Yeah. So, I mean, it kind of knocks you down a few pegs, makes you question, like, what am I doing? And then when this opportunity came up, it was actually really special and probably meant for the better. And you know, the training sessions were really good in Chicago, but I think I needed game experience at that point. And so that decision just kind of made itself. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was like the first ever fully professional season for the Super League. So formerly it was like part-time. And so most of the women were working at a wage that wouldn't sustain them not having another job, just like the NWSL. And then the second year that I was there as well was when we got the title sponsor, Barclays. And so it was just like the Premier League. And then now you're seeing it really a lot all over the place. And I'm telling you, exponentially grown within like literally 3 years, I want to say. So I, in retrospect, obviously I felt like a failure, but I think a door was open that was necessary. And Joe, I wish you were able to go over with me. You would have loved it. It was so technical though. Like, I'm not even kidding you. You would have just like loved, I don't know how to explain it, like the style of play, just in terms of like keeping the ball, getting the ball. Like, it was just very soccer IQ forward, I guess you could say.
I laugh that I like always wish that I was like English.
Yeah, you should have just feigned it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It would have worked for you so well. But I mean, like, I felt like I was pretty technical at the time as a rookie. But then when you get put with like other technical players, you're like, well, that's not my specialty anymore. So like, how do I adapt? So like, I think it helped me grow again as a player in terms of also understanding like more of the tactical side in addition to like the physical and technical. So overall, at the time I was kicking and screaming and really upset about it, but I think
obviously like hindsight is 2020, but like for me, I look back and I'm like, I was coming off my fifth year when I got drafted. I was coming off my 2 ACLs. So for me, even though I thought I was probably 100% game ready, I actually still needed like a lot of training time. So like by the time that I look back and I'm like, okay, well, that was maybe the crappy situation that a professional soccer player could be in. Then I was like, you know what? I had an amazing host family. I was able to actually train and, you know, hopefully that set me up for Orlando when I did start and I did play.
Yeah.
But hindsight,
I feel like too, you're bringing up good points that are not necessarily like publicly discussed because they're not necessarily like big issues you would think of. But when I think about the CBA obviously being ratified, what was it, like 2 weeks ago, I was in a similar boat to you, Bri, where I went into the difference is I went in as an invitee into North Carolina, but I was behind Urseg and Dahlkemper. Like, I knew basically by the week 3 that like I could stay here, and I'm sure you all know what it's like to be basically a practice player, like on the second string in the NWSL. It's like brutal, just training every day. And I feel like when you're 21 or 22 or 23, you're like, well, how am I going to get better? I'm like, every week I'm mimicking another team to help. And I want to help the team go to win, but it's like, am I getting better? So it's twofold in the sense of like, the only option really is to find an opportunity outside the United States, which I'm like you, have a passport. Then there's also the issue of people like Joanna who don't have a passport, who may have been drafted and their rights are held, which is why it's so critical that these kind of things came into place where you can't really honestly chain girls to certain situations. There has to be more, you can't be like, you're not going to play, but you're not going to be able to go somewhere else. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like there has to be.
Yeah, that happened.
No, it does. But I'm saying like, this is a little thing that like, you're not going to see on Twitter as a major piece of CBA, but it's something that has and needs to be resolved and had to be resolved. Because how many players, I could probably think of like 5 off the top of my head that either weren't playing and were rostered or were not rostered that ended up playing at another team because they probably just weren't in the right situation. But it took so much extra time because they had to get through all of the, the coach won't let me go and they're holding my rights, and players just have no power or empowerment. Like, how you do
things that I like have kind of forgotten about, and it's like, oh,
sorry, Joe, but no,
it's good though, like, because like that's it needs to be discussed, because like I'm just thinking about, like, we were told we had to go on a bus to South Dakota to 15 hours. Was it 12 hours on a bus to play on the reserve team with the team that we beat in Oak Brook 15-0? We ain't doing that.
But also, like, remember we had a whole second team because the college girls were back at the time. So I had called Brian being like, I make my tips on the weekend because I was working 3 jobs. So I'm like, can I like not have to drive the 12? And he was like, not a problem. Well, then come Monday, apparently it was a huge problem. And
a big problem, because we all linked together and finally put our foot down. We were like, none of us are doing this. None of us are doing this. We're not driving. We're not getting on this bus. We're not doing it.
But apparently, yeah, there was a lot that was said that was really inappropriate, but I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, it was a lot. But it's crazy because like at the time, so you know how you're saying, oh, these are things that need to be discussed.
Yeah.
I 100% resonate with that. And at the time, because you're like, what's wrong with me? You make it about yourself.
Yes.
Instead of, it's a systemic issue. Like, it's not actually the player's fault.
Well, I also think you can't underestimate fit. How many times have you seen a player that's so talented that just either doesn't fit the system, there isn't an opportunity for them because maybe there's national teams in front of her or whatever, and either they retire or they never make it anywhere else because one, they can't go anywhere else. And people, I think they miss that. It's in men's sports too, right? Like sometimes it's lucky. You fall into the right system and the coach believes in you. And so it's actually funny that that's something that's really resonated with me because when I left, I had an opportunity. I remember going to Paul at the time and saying, he's like, you can stay. And I said, well, I have an offer to go play in Norway. Like, I don't know what to do. And, and of course he put it back in my hands. And then in my head, I was like, I'm not going to probably play as much here. So let me go to Norway. Norway was a very horrible experience for me. And I ended up having it. I went out, I had to break my contract to come back. And so that made me resonate with you in the sense of like, I felt like a failure. Nothing about my situation. The fact that they had me in a hotel room for 2 months, that they like didn't agree. None of that stuck with me. It was just like, you failed. You didn't succeed because of X, Y, and Z. And so when I went to my second opportunity to go play Champions League in Europe, I was so mental about it because everything was about like, you can't fail. So I'm just curious, like you go to England, right? Again, like sounds like a really positive experience, but when was the shift for you? Because I can only imagine like, despite like maybe the league, like you said, it was like kind of coming to fruition then in terms of being like a world powerhouse. When was the moment when you got overseas and you said, okay, like, maybe that pressure of having to succeed, or if you felt that way going in, like this was your one opportunity to kind of keep pushing through your professional career. Did you feel that way? And if so, like, when was that moment that you kind of felt a little bit of security? Like, okay, I deserve to be here. When did that happen?
I think it's actually funny that so I instead went in with like a pissed off mentality because I'm like, fact that I have to travel this far to freaking play a game is pissed me off.
Great. To be fair.
And
That's
at
a fair,
you know, at the time I had a serious boyfriend like Joe, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is ridiculous. How is this distance gonna work? Like, how long is this gonna last? I was so mad. So I went in with like a huge chip on my shoulder, like, I'm only spending 1 year here and I'm going home. Like, this is ridiculous. But so I ended up actually kicking ass like really hard at the beginning of the season, and then like other stuff had happened, but I don't want to delve into that. But the second half of the season wasn't as fun as the first half. But I will say, like, sorry, my dog's playing with her phone.
No worries.
Lucy, please go to the room. Go. I love you. I know. I'll be there in a sec.
Yeah.
Just look at me.
I know.
But then the second half of the season was a little rough. But at the same time, it looked super successful on the outside. So like we went to the FA Cup final, got to play a bunch in that, and that's like the Super Bowl. So like the first ever for me experience in England is that I get to go to essentially the Super Bowl in England. So that was incredible. Didn't realize it until we were going out for warmups and I couldn't hear people talking to me. And I was like, oh my God, like this is a big deal. Yeah. And then it kind of just was like, then you feel grateful for the moment. But then the second season that I pursued over there, because essentially I had the opportunity to come back, but I didn't feel comfortable with where I wanted to go. So I was like, let's just stay. And then I ended up coming back with the Dash. But Joe, actually at the time when I was still playing in England, I was getting text messages from someone being like, keeping an eye. And I was like, please don't. Please don't.
Please don't. I don't know. No.
Well, because like Joe, and you know, you talk about timing and like players in front of me. Joe knows this. Like you had Julie Ertz playing in midfield at the
They're
time.
still there.
V, who also got national team experience and Danny.
And then you had like the most Chicago Red Stars experiences ever.
Literally. So I was like, why did you draft me? Like what purpose? Because I'm a midfielder, obviously. So I'm like, what purpose was I going to ever serve? Like, so I was like, please don't look at me. Please don't keep my rights. Please, please, please. But yeah.
Did Chicago, when you decided to come back, did Chicago have your rights?
No,
or did they expire?
They expired at the end of the season, but then I wasn't sure, like I said, about the situation coming back, which in retrospect, this was actually the best decision. And then I know that Dash had picked it up somewhere in like December, because I think there's like another window where you can pick up rights. And they're like, are you absolutely sure you're coming? And I was like, yeah, I'll be there. And then COVID actually hit, which I would have joined mid-season with Dash.
Okay.
Because of how the English season ends in May.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, that's kind of poopy, because then you have to come in like trying to unsettle a group, which is not always a great feeling either. So actually it worked out perfectly. And then I got back prior to the season starting, and then have been with the Dash obviously since. So yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So talk about Houston a little bit. What's the difference from, I mean, you've seen Chicago, you've seen England, you've seen now Houston. What has been the biggest learning kind of curve that you've taken in your 5 years now? 5-ish years playing professional?
I think I'm still 4.
Were you still 4? Okay.
Don't date me yet.
No, 4. Still 4. What do you think kind of, you've been on a roller coaster. Do you feel at peace? Kind of where are you at in that process?
I'd say this year I feel a little bit more settled. Obviously, when you come back into the NWSL, again, I had a chip on my shoulder of like, I didn't make it here. I feel like I failed. So I was irritated again. Played pretty well when I came in, but then obviously the second season, it's weird. Like then you start to doubt, like, do I really belong here? Like you have a little bit of imposter syndrome and you're like, am I the person that I think I am? So last year was a bit more of a roller coaster, and like, I'm trying to be better with my mental side of the game, because I think it definitely affected my physiology last year. Like I messed up my ankle, and knock on wood, I've never had issues before with anything, like genuinely. And so I felt like that was definitely like self-inflicted. I know that sounds really weird, but
it's crazy what the brain can do.
Yeah. And so it just, and there was like nothing diagnosable about the ankle either. So I was like, this is a little weird. So this year I'm coming back with like, I guess another chip on my shoulder of like, okay, I've had the experience. I need to just live into who I am. And so like not proving myself, or not underperforming and being scared of what could or could not happen, but just enjoying it. Cause, you know, I had a moment in the off season, and this is kind of personal, where I was playing like indoor with like a bunch of old Mexican men with beer
Yeah.
bellies. You're like, oh, you're slow. No,
Yeah.
they'll kick your butt. So, it was a lot of fun, but I like got done with one of the sessions one night and I was like, God, that was so much fun. I haven't had so much fun like that in a while. And I heard myself say it and I was like, what? Like,
Yeah.
you play pro for a living. Like, what do you mean you haven't enjoyed it in a really long time? And genuinely, I like reflected on it and it scared me because I was like, well, you don't know when obviously my injury put it into perspective. You don't know when you're going to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's limited. So why are you not enjoying it? And so this year I'm just really trying to, you know, enjoy my craft
Yeah.
and experience it wholly, because I feel like sometimes I look too far forward and then I'm like, how do I get there? And then I'm unhappy with my daily, which it's silly. Like I'm doing something that a lot of people would love to do. And why wouldn't I try to enjoy it? Obviously easier said than done, but
yeah, I feel like too, you know, it's so interesting when we talk to, you know, the fact that we're former players, I always think this perspective because I can feel you on the mental side. I felt like now looking back, I'm like, wow, like you start to get confidence in new things that you're doing, like Joe for coaching, me now back in soccer in a different capacity. But it's crazy when you look back, you're like, wow, if I just like believed in myself at that time, like what are the limits of where I could have, what I could have done physically. But I wouldn't discount the fact that like, it's, you know, I appreciate you saying that because it just shows how much you care. But I do think like this has been a rough 2 years, and being somebody who now works in the league and is in the front office for a team, I feel like, you know, coming in as a former player and seeing how things are run, like I'm with Gotham and I feel good about what we do, but there's always improvement areas, right? And I think that's holistic for the league. And, you know, we don't have like sometimes like this week, I know you guys know the Super Bowl is happening and I'm just like, God, like, could you imagine just like putting your feet up? Like right now, someone walks your dog, you have a meal waiting for you. Maybe the masseuse kicks in tomorrow. Like there's just so many layers. And again, like I get it. We're going to get there. It's going to take time, but I don't think that players need to apologize for that. And I think you're fair to feel the way you feel because COVID sucked. And I know it sucked for players. So that's kind of my hope for this year is that you're happy, not just because you've changed your mindset, but because the environment of the league holistically is making you happier because you feel like you are truly a professional and the environment is so great that you can just focus on your craft. That's kind of,
well, that's exciting, honestly, to hear you say, because I actually worked with the bargaining committee this last year for like Dash rep, and it was a long, hard battle with a lot of things. And obviously I'm not trying to put a target on my back or say anything, but
Sure.
it's good to see like what is encouraging when we were moving forward is seeing so many players, former players, now being part of the league. And like Joe, hopefully you have the desire to coach seriously in the NWSL, because I feel like that would be a natural progression. However, that's if you want it, but like we do need those type of players that have that experience and understand it so that like it doesn't happen anymore. And we only build forward and not just like maintain like a bare minimum. So I like truly appreciate you saying that, just because it's refreshing to hear.
I mean, Joe knows this. I worked in finance 2 months ago. And I've always told people like my passion is to get on the front office side because I just know what you guys deserve. And I want to be a part of that in whatever capacity I can be. And I got lucky with the Gotham situation. We have a whole new front staff and Yael's great and everything. But yeah, it's just so important. Representation in different ways, right? Like it can't all be players, but it also, you have to have people in place that like put the players' priorities also on the mind. Like sometimes it doesn't work, but even little things, right? Like meals after training and all those things that like we can do better that are just going to help you be better at your craft.
I'm like, because I just remember, like, I literally remember Bri busting her ass at that damn restaurant and walking those, like,
it was fun.
And like, but for you to then be able to help, you know, with the dash and help with the rep, like to help, so players don't have to do that anymore. Like you did that, you did what you had to do, but shouldn't have had to do. And now you're a part of completely kind of hoping to mitigate and change everything. So I think that's really, really cool and a cool
Yeah.
progression.
Nothing makes me happier nowadays when I get emails that are like, this has changed because like we have to do this because of the CBA. Like I'm like, great, things are getting better. Like I may make it my job harder, but I'm pumped about it because I'm like, they fought for. I mean, people don't even realize they haven't talked about like 6 or 7 things, but this is like a huge. There's so many line items of things that are going to improve. So I want to get into that little. I'm glad to hear that you kind of had in that a little bit in terms of the dash and being a part of it. One, talk about like if you can and want, like just kind of that process for you. And then also like, do you think to your point when you said like it wasn't your dream to be a professional player, do you feel a little bit more stability as a player going into this season, knowing that like certain standards are going to be better, there is longevity with the league, that you can feel comfortable that you're gonna have a job? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So obviously part of the negotiations, there's so many nuances. So like, for instance, like a simple example, we were at one point kicking around a tiered system for minimum wage. And I was like, it sounds good because obviously you want to honor those that have come before us. I was like, however, if you have a player that's close to aging out, I know how the NWSL works. They'll probably make them retire because they're not going to want to pay them more. So I was like, we got to rethink that just a little bit. And hopefully, a lot of people aren't living on the minimum. Unfortunately, I think it was like something 90% or 80 to 90% of the league is on the minimum. But then obviously we had agreed to the minimum like months and months ago, but then towards the end of the negotiations, it became apparent, obviously, when other people in the bargaining staff were negotiating new contracts, that they're like, well, if we have the new minimum, we're not sure what we can give you. And then I was sitting back going, oh God, are they going to cut corners and do like a minimum roster, which I know could happen. So then we obviously started kicking around ideas of like, okay, well, we have to have like a bare minimum roster number that they can't go below, because I have a feeling some clubs will try their best.
15 players, you're like, one injury, it's over.
Right. I mean, you got to think of the incentives, and this in finance. You're like, well, how do we make people do what we need them to do? So it was a difficult process. Obviously, there's a lot of opinions on things. Sometimes, and it's, Joe, I appreciate you acknowledging like I had to work several jobs, because it did put a fire in my chest to be like, no, like we can't have this anymore where like trialists come in for an extended period of time. Like it has to end. And then like, same thing, if someone gets drafted, I'm like, they have to get service years if they're not getting employed, because it's not fair that they're still being held indefinitely without pay. So it's just like all these little different things started coming together. And obviously I would refer to myself as the free agency hound, because I was always on the free agency side being like, free agency, stick it to the man, but like not in a bad way. Just like, I think that there's a lot of benefits to free agency, and I saw it in the Super League. And, and the perspective isn't like, oh, I want to make everyone's, pockets bleed. It's, I want what's best for the future of the league. And I want to be able to give people a fair wage as well as attract the best international talent. So it's like, we can't set, you know what I'm saying? And then I don't know. I just, a lot of it.
It makes me really, really happy though, that like there's different voices from, there's national team voices, there's longtime veteran voices, but to know that like you have been a voice in all of this as somebody that experienced everything we experienced together in that short period of time, that there is a voice for, that little segment of a group that sometimes gets really, really screwed. But if you haven't been screwed by it, you really don't even know it even existed. Yeah. So for you to be able to have that voice through this whole process makes me, Joe Boyles 4 years ago, at peace, so that nobody kind of has to go through what we went through during that time, because it wasn't healthy.
It's definitely coming together collectively. That's so hard. Like, I don't think people even realize that. Like, she's speaking on her experiences, and you have a national team player who's speaking on their experiences, and more people are going to have more things they're willing to give up, and yada, yada. It's like to find no one's ever going to be perfectly happy, but to come together as women and say, okay, like we're comfortable with this, and then hold them to that. I'm like, that's like something like when you're older, I think you should tell, your kids or your family, like I was a part of something that, really is going to benefit so many people over so much time that, you should be really proud
Yeah, I was surprised, honest, when I first volunteered, obviously, and let me backtrack a little bit first though. Like, I will say, like, obviously people don't really understand certain circumstances when they're not directly affected by it. But when it was brought forward, a lot of people were so excited to get on board and support those things, because obviously it's important that we have a healthy, sustainable league. So that was the coolest part about all of it, is seeing everybody really work. Like, you could tell there's like a share it. I've never felt so, how do I say this, united, I guess you could say, with so many different groups. Like, I could say I'm probably good pals in terms of, because you get on the little text threads with a lot of girls in the league, which normally I would never have interacted with ever on the soccer pitch, probably, and would probably be enemies on the field. But it was cool. It was an awesome experience. But obviously, like, moving forward, I'm just like hoping that it just builds towards like a sustainable future. And it's just like super exciting, because even I got a friend that works like in the Yankees organization, and he texted me a few days after and was like, "Hey, did you know you just made history?" And I was like, "What?" Because originally when I signed up for it, I was like, I'm hell-bent on making sure what happened to me doesn't happen again. And so that's my biggest concern moving forward. And that and my experience in England was really eye-opening, because they mirror the Premier League. So they're very far advanced in terms of like their systems in place. And so I have a perspective of hopefully too what our PA can be, because I was part of the PA there. So I'm hoping that we can build it out even further in terms of services for players. But long story short, it just, how do I say this? It was a good experience to just like build out, I guess, the CBA and be part of history, because I hadn't intended that to be the case. It just was like,
because when you do something for the pure goodness and the trueness of who you like, for the goodness of what am I trying to say?
You're doing it for if you're doing it as a mission for a group of women in which you're a part of. It's you don't think about what it's going to do in 30 days. You're thinking about right now, where can we get on the negotiating table and push this through?
Exactly.
Because I want to play soccer and not be working 3 jobs. That's the mindset.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I love that. So just to kind of wrap up, just for, all your fans out there and everybody listening, who describe Bri Visalli off the soccer pitch, because you're a very, very passionate, unique, charismatic, freaking hilarious human being. And I have sun in my face that I'm trying to dodge as I'm telling this question. Who are you off the soccer pitch for everybody to hear?
I'd say sometimes it can be very inappropriate with my humor, but it's purely for a good time. And I don't know. I feel weird talking.
What would Katie say? What would Katie say?
Katie, what would you say? What would you say I am off the field? Crazy.
Crazy?
Is that Katie not?
Yeah.
Katie! I didn't know she was your roomie.
Yeah, come say hi, Katie.
Come on,
another super badass. She was also on the CBA committee too. So
of course she was.
Oh, celeb appearance.
Of course she was.
Come in here, sister.
Hey, nap.
What up? Good morning.
What's up?
Congratulations on the whole CBA. I know
We're really excited for you
so
guys.
excited. Big relief that we finally got that thing done.
Yeah. Now you can rest and see at night.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see you guys. You have to let me, well, we don't have a calendar yet, but once you're in New York for Gotham, I may travel to the Houston game too. I don't know yet. But.
Do it.
Nice.
We'll have to show you around Houston. We've got a whole coffee shop situation.
H-Town, right?
You need to come too.
I know.
H-Town has some nice food and stuff.
Yeah,
They
like
do.
we have to limit ourselves. We've been trying to not eat out as much because there's been a financial problem for us.
Oh yeah, I
The
get you
coffee
there.
bill is way too high.
Coffee, like all of a sudden, it's like $7 a cup. You're like, what?
I would like to say my Dunkin' cold brew
Okay.
now gone up in price.
What is it, like
$5
$29?
in 5.
Really?
At Dunkin'?
Yes.
Oh wow.
Oh, that's
real.
Joe, can I
that's
tell
real
you
good.
that you turned me on to the Dunkin' Donuts cold brew? Seriously. And you know I'm a snob about
I know
coffee.
you are.
And I love it. Like I told Katie about it and I was like, yeah, we can go get it at Dunkin'. Yay, that's so good.
I'm quoting that and I'm making Tina put it on a little what do we call it? One of those little things we can.
I love it.
Oh,
Well, it's been
seriously,
amazing, and
thank you.
thank you
Thanks
guys
for
so
coming.
much, and
No, seriously,
we're
thank you
excited
guys.
for this year.
Well, sorry, we
Yeah,
come
Katie,
prepared.
We love Katie.
My work wife.
Package deal.
But no, seriously, I really do appreciate it. You guys, this was fun. And actually, it was really great to meet you, Tina and Joe. Great catching up with you.
I
This was
know.
awesome. Honestly, seriously.